The alarm clock hit 4 a.m. and screamed. Elias slammed his hand down, killing the noise.
But the silence that followed felt heavier. His fingers shook as he reached for the phone.
It was never just sleep that he lost. 72 unread messages, a dozen urgent pings. A flashing red icon demanded a tax payment, blinking like a pulse in the dark.
He sat on the edge of the bed and scrolled. Every notification was a demand, a tether pulling him toward a life he no longer recognized.
He stood up and moved to the window. His reflection stared back, distorted by the glass. The room behind him was crowded with expensive gear,
cold and metallic in the pre-dawn light. He felt the tightness in his chest, a pressure that had nothing to do with the hour.
He looked at the phone again, then tossed it onto the pillow.
The screen lit up instantly with another alert. He ignored it, gripped the edge of the dresser until his knuckles turned white,
and tried to breathe. The house was full of things he had bought to feel successful, yet he stood in the center of it, feeling like a ghost in his own life.
He grabbed his briefcase and sprinted. The station platform was a river of gray shapes moving in perfect, joyless synchronization. Elias wedged himself into the train car, crushed between bodies that did not acknowledge his presence. The air inside smelled of stale coffee and damp synthetic fabric. Every passenger stared into a palm-sized screen, their faces washed in a cold, flickering blue light. Beside him, a man typed with furious, trembling thumbs, beads of sweat rolling down his temple despite the chill of the morning. The man's breath came in ragged, uneven hitches. Elias looked at the screen, then at the man's frantic hands, then back at the dark tunnel rushing past the window. The train screeched, metal grinding against metal, a high-pitched wail that vibrated deep in his teeth. It was a rhythmic, mechanical pulse that demanded total submission. Elias gripped the overhead rail, his knuckles locking. The doors hissed open at the next stop. The crowd surged forward, but Elias did not move. He stood anchored to the floor as the warning chime began to sound. He watched the gap between the train and the platform widen. The mechanical rhythm finally broke. The doors slammed shut, sealing the train's frantic pulse inside. Elias stood alone on the platform.
The silence that rushed in was absolute. He turned his back on the station and walked into the morning mist.
The city was waking up, but he was moving against the current. Billboards loomed overhead, flashing high-contrast promises of limited offers and instant success. But the words no longer registered. He navigated past the glass and steel canyons, his boots clicking on the pavement.
Every step felt heavier, then suddenly lighter, as if he were shedding a physical weight.
He reached a park on the edge of the business district. He found a wooden bench, wiped the damp surface, and sat. A squirrel darted across the grass, intent on burying an acorn. Elias watched it, his breathing slowing to match the rhythm of the trees. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a final, frantic vibration. He pulled it out, watched the screen flicker with notifications, and then held the power button until the light vanished. The screen went black. He placed the dead device on the bench beside him and looked up at the sky. For the first time in years, there was no deadline. Elias walked into his living room, the space feeling alien in its suffocating density.
He grabbed a cardboard box and began to work. He yanked the smart TV from its mount, the cables snapping like dry veins,
and dropped it into a heap of plastic and glass. He reached for his wrist, unbuckled his heavy watch, and tossed it into a donation bin without a second glance. The sound of metal hitting the bottom echoed in the quiet room. He dismantled the surround sound system, pulling speakers from corners until the wires lay coiled like dead snakes on the floor. He carried the boxes to the curb, his arms straining under the weight of his former life. He did not look back. He returned to the center of the room and dragged the heavy desk toward the wall, clearing the floor. One by one, he cleared the gadgets, the controllers, and the decorative clutter that had filled his drawers for years. By dusk, the house was a hollow shell. No glowing screens, no humming routers, no reminders of the frantic pace. Only a single wooden chair remained, sitting in the center of the floor, facing the cold hearth. The silence was heavy, but it no longer felt like a vacuum. It felt like space. Elias struck a match and touched it to the dry kindling. The wood caught, casting flickering shadows against the bare walls. Outside, rain began to lash against the roof, a steady, rhythmic drumming that drowned out the hum of the distant city. He poured a cup of tea, the steam curling into the cool air.
A sharp, insistent knocking erupted at the front door. A voice muffled by wood shouted about a missed quarterly review,
demanding he open up. Elias did not move. He watched the embers pulse and glow, the urgent pounding on the door fading into the background of his own heartbeat. The voice gave up, retreating into the wet night. The silence returned, deeper than before. He stretched his hands toward the warmth, turning them over, watching the skin catch the firelight. They were still, no tremors, no reflexive reaching for a phone. The heavy pressure that had anchored his chest for 20 years simply dissolved, leaving behind a hollow that finally felt like rest. He leaned back, listening to the logs settle in the grate.
He whispered to the room, "I have enough." Outside, the moon climbed high above the horizon.
Indifferent to the deadlines of the world, suspended in a dark and perfectly silent sky.